Good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Barry. I'm a Director of Global Client Services at Proclinical Staffing. At Proclinical, we identify as global growth partners as we support companies experiencing rapid expansion, both nationally and internationally, as they move through R&D to commercialization. A high proportion of the companies we support are headquartered here in the US, looking at expanding into Europe and beyond. As a truly global business ourselves, we're well equipped to tackle the distinct challenges of identifying and engaging niche talent across international territories. Our stakeholders are varied, but increasingly we find ourselves working with talented in-house recruitment teams in need of the support and expertise of our global workforce to find top talent. Today, I'm honoured to be chairing this panel session with three very impressive people that we've worked closely with over the past few years. Nicole Barna, in the middle, Head of HR at Codiak Biosciences, Carolyn Pastore, Director of Talent Acquisition at Blueprint Medicines, and Donna Vieraitis, Head of HR at Servier Pharmaceuticals, as we discuss the topic of growing your life sciences business in a talent-short market. So, Donna, I'll come to you first, if I may. What would you say the challenges are engaging in a highly competitive talent market like we have, and how does your business, Servier, differentiate themselves amongst that?
Thanks, Sam. Good morning, everybody. We're really happy to be here. So I'm Donna Vieraitis, Head of HR, as Sam said, at Servier Pharmaceuticals. We are an interesting company in that we just kicked off September 1st, 2018. We are a divestment from Shire, started as an oncology business that Servier, a 65-year-old privately held company, bought, first presence in the United States. So the challenges and how we differentiate ourselves are really interesting. So we're privately held and we'll always be privately held. So when we take a look at, how do we compete in this market, we don't have stock, we'll never have stock or equity. So we had to really think about how we would recruit people, what was going to appeal to folks. We're right here in the Seaport. And it's a very cool building where Anthony's Pier 4 used to be. So it's, Pier 4 Boulevard. We've got a great environment, but one of the things that I think we really focused on, and it touches on what many of you talked about, the employee experience. How do we get people to come to Servier Pharmaceuticals and they're coming to Seaport, first of all, so we're not in Cambridge. What we did was we really put in a very, very flexible environment for folks. So much like many of our other companies, but we're really open about it. Flex time, our vacation is not tracked. Take your vacation when you want to take it. Just work with your managers. So we have focused on our employees and given them so much trust to just get the job done. And we have not had a difficult time attracting people because this is an opportunity for folks to come into much of a startup kind of environment, but with a very nice security of Servier umbrella over them. So it's not the kind of financial, quarterly results that you've kind of got to look to the market for, or your board or whatever. So it's an exciting place to be, and we're still building.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Okay. I'm Carolyn Pastore with Blueprint Medicines. We are a biotech company in the oncology and rare disease space. We've been around for 8.5 years, and we are scaling. You probably heard that before. Well, we're one of them. We're about 270 employees right now. We're in the process of building out 4 different field teams, including all of our sales and national accounts and diagnostic teams, because we're precision medicine, as well as global. It's all happening at the same time. So we'll probably have another 70 or so employees on board by the end of the year. So I took a break out of my day to come here and speak. So how do we differentiate ourselves? Well, we have this platform, this amazing platform that we know the science works. So that's great, right? It's great when you know that your science is working. We have a great scientific founders, an amazing executive team. If anybody was here on Wednesday, they may have heard Debbie Bumpus speak, my boss. She's amazing. And so the talent does look at the market, right? They say, who's doing well? Where do I want to be? And so we've had some success there, right? So we were sort of riding that train. But we are not immune to what anybody else is going through. We are still fighting for talent. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I think that we draw people that want to wear broad hats, that want to do a lot, that see the mission, align with our values and goals. And that's something else I know we'll talk a little bit more later. And I think that we've been very lucky. We've been very fortunate. We have a very low turnover rate right now. But we are, again, not immune to what you all are going through. I know for us, I think about medical directors for one. Anybody, does that speak to anybody? Is anybody here? And if any of you that is not an issue, please message me, because I would definitely love to learn from you. But these are thorns, right? These are real challenges in the organization, because we're really trying to advance and grow and meet your business goals. And without having the right talent on board, it's almost impossible to do that. So we need to get really creative around that. But I think that what I hear generally in the marketplace, and what my team hears in the marketplace, is that they want to be part of this rocket ship. They want to be part of this mission. And I think we look for values, and skills is one thing, but values is something else. And I think aligning on that is really, really important. And so we've given lots of people chances that might have come from other industries that aren't necessarily coming in because they know people. And it's worked for us. So I think Blueprint is an amazing place to be right now. That's my plug. Have to do that. And we have a great leadership team that is empowering of their people, and they're aligned as a unit. And I think that in itself is really special. And I think one thing that you see, and I haven't always seen this at companies, but it's something that I feel special at Blueprint, is that our CEO, for one, is very involved. He cares about his people. He walks in on meetings. I tell this to candidates as they come through. I mean, he will walk in and might not know you and say, "What's going on?" and tell me about what you're working on. Tell me about the issues. And it could be at any level, at anywhere. And I often say that if there's really no place to hide in the company. So if you are okay with that, and you want that challenge, and you want that accountability, then Blueprint could be a great place. But if you are not looking for that, then it may not be great. And so we often look for people to self-select out. So that's also part of it, and that's okay. Yeah.
I could add maybe just 2 comments. So my name's Nicole Barna, and I'm at Codiak Biosciences, which is a small preclinical company in Kendall. So I think similar to Blueprint, one of the pieces that differentiates us is our science. We've got very exciting novel science. We're a platform and a pipeline company. Mm-hmm. And so we're able to attract scientists, because that's really who we're recruiting mostly now, because they're excited to be part of a novel organization. And that lends itself to our culture, which is the other key differentiator for us. Mm-hmm. We are small, so we're able to have that biotech feel. We have very fast decision making and very streamlined communication. And that, I think, has been really key for us from a cultural standpoint. So those would be the 2 things that I would highlight when I'm talking to potential candidates, to think about the size of the organization and the stage that we're in, and how that lends itself to some ability to make an impact.
Thank you. I wanted to move on to engagement with internal stakeholders. As a recruiter, we've often seen hiring managers perhaps wanting to do things one way, and I'm sure everyone can relate to having to maybe pull them people back into line. So how do you go about engaging with internal stakeholders to make sure they align to process that is outlined?
good one. Especially as you scale the organization. And if you come from the early discovery organization, they have their own way of wanting to think about things. So we want a long day of interviews and 14 to 17 people on the interview team, and what's this behavioral-based interview thing? Don't want to be a part of that. And so I usually come with data. And so I think that that is really helpful to pull the process through and to try to influence that way. And we try to influence from the bottom up as well as the top down. And so pulling some of those best practices through, and just remembering that what we're trying to put in place is to help get to where we want to go faster and more efficiently and to ultimately meet the business goals. So.
Sure. So I'm going to think a little bit about an experience I had a few years ago. I was working for Biogen at the time, and I was working in their UK office. And I think what I found in that case, when you're trying to align stakeholders across different countries and different therapeutic areas, the most important thing to me was to start out and really understand where that business stakeholder was coming from. What was most important to them in terms of the process? And then how can you think about what your talent acquisition process and approach and strategy was, and where can you find that common alignment? Because I think, in my experience, company culture is a big driver for having a consistent strategy and process across the globe, but also things like operational efficiency and how quickly you can get things done. And lastly, we had a lot of professional career expectations, so level expectations if you were going to level the position, or promotional expectations. And so if you can understand where the business leader is coming from and educate them about the process, I think people really find that those are really important parameters for any employee in any location. And so understanding how the strategy can meet their needs and educating them on that process, to me, was the most important thing for getting that alignment.
I'll just add a couple of things. So at Servier Pharmaceuticals, being, again, a subsidiary of a much larger company, we have values that drive the culture. And one of the things that has really worked for us at sort of this startup US subsidiary is to align our stakeholders, our hiring managers, on these values as we're interviewing. So we're looking at the skills, of course, and that drives a lot of what we're hiring for. But if we can't align an individual potential candidate with the values and the culture, then it's possibly not a good fit. So we have a very small HR team, and our management team is actually very small and streamlined, so it's really easy for us to be clear on the interview panel what we're looking for, because the fit is so much a driver in that hiring decision.
You both mentioned interview panels. We actually worked with a company who I won't name, who insisted on, I think, 22 on an interview panel throughout an interview process, and that wasn't even for VP or C-level hires.
Yeah, that's a little much.
A lot of the work
Yeah.
we do at Proclinical is helping biotechs expand primarily from America to Europe. So when it comes to the global growth strategies that these companies put in place, and perhaps yours, what do you think are the primary factors that need to be considered when entering Europe or any other international market? Nicole.
Sure. So I've been fortunate to have worked at both headquarters and in satellite offices. And I think, again, to me, the most important piece is to really get a good understanding of the local labor conditions. So we used to joke around and say, like, I'm from headquarters, I'm here to help. And I think you really don't want to take that approach necessarily. So when I was with Biogen, they moved me to Japan as well. And getting into Japan initially was a very, very different scenario than Boston and Cambridge or even the UK. And so the first thing that I needed to do was really spend a lot of time understanding what's the situation there, what do employees expect from the process and from a company, what was their understanding of Biogen's brand at the time, and how could we help influence that. And then really get a sense from headquarters, what did headquarters think was most important? And again, how can we build those bridges between what was going to happen at the local level and then what was going to happen, or what corporate really wanted us to drive? And just maybe a couple of quick examples. At the time, we were going through a process of really trying to minimize the number of agencies that we were using, both contingency and sort of executive search agencies. And Japan, when I was there, is a very, very heavily agency-heavy market. And partially that's because in Japan, the culture is that people don't like to change jobs, right? You start a company and you stay there your whole life. And so the process of changing jobs is kind of frowned upon. But of course, you're building an organization, so you're trying to get people to change jobs and you want people with experience. So, we really had to figure out which agencies did we want to work with because they were going to represent who we were and who we wanted to be as a company most effectively. And then help headquarters understand, no, we still need to use these agencies because people aren't going to apply on their own, and it just the market isn't open to that sort of reach out. So it took a lot of kind of learning the market directly myself and working with people on the ground in Japan, and then also translating that information back to corporate in that respect. So.
I'll jump in here. So ours is kind of a bit of an opposite. On the Servier Pharmaceuticals side. So again, we're the US subsidiary. We have our headquarters in Paris, France. And so we do have some of our employees in the US that report into a manager in France. And so that's a little bit different. There's some R&D roles that kind of happen that way. And so when we're trying to recruit in the US for an individual that's reporting to somebody in France, we had a little bit of struggle in the beginning because the French manager wanted to drive it out of France and try to hire and run everything there and then kind of flip it to us in the US. Well, that only happened once. And after 3 months, looking at Sam, because we were working with Proclinical helping us, they said, this isn't going to work. And I said, precisely. We need to recruit here for people in the US. And then when we get to the short list, we can do some Skype interviews with you in France. So influencing our headquarters and helping them understand, educate what the Boston market is really about was a challenge, I have to say. But they got it. They got it because after 3 months, they realized that they really kind of couldn't do this without us focusing directly on the ground in Boston.
So I'm learning from these guys, and Blueprint's on the opposite end. So we are based in Cambridge, which you know, and then we decided that just like we've done everything else, we're just going to go for it. And so we're going to wholly own all of our assets, and we're going to build in Europe all at the same time. And so as we went through that process of what are we going to do, how do we do this, what's the strategy, and what are you taking into consideration? We went out and tried to figure out where is the talent market, and that was one of the things that we looked at. And we did end up in Switzerland, in Zug, and even though we thought we may end up there, we still went through the exercise of going to different countries and understanding the laws, the tax implications, really understanding where does it make sense, and Zug ended up being one of those places. And we had the same issue that we had here in the United States when we first started. When I came to Blueprint 2.5 years ago, was early clinic, and we're Blueprint, and everybody said, I love Bluebird. Bluebird's amazing. And I thought, Bluebird is amazing. They're down the street and they're in gene therapy, but we're Blueprint. And so, of course, the same issue in Europe where people just didn't know who we were. And so we needed to really understand who were the influencers, where was the talent, who are the influencers, align ourselves with those people, and really try to get our brand out. And that meant we had to rely on search partners to help. We had hired our general manager, and then to hire the heads of the countries and then his leadership team. And now I think word is spreading. The general managers haven't started yet, so I think it will remain to be seen in how we pull those processes through. But we did our behavioral-based interviewing, so we shall see. So it's, like I said, we're on the front end of it, and it's exciting, but I think we also understand that we need to be restrained in this because it is expensive. It's very expensive to go global. And our first indication, like many small biotech companies, is a very small indication. PDGFR alpha is the biomarker, and patient population is very small. So it's not going to be a big revenue generator. And so we need to think about, what does that look like? What does that revenue look like? And we need to be really mindful of our growth. So aligning with the people that you're bringing on board to understand that you can operate in a lean way and find creative ways to get the job done until we can actually really invest in that growth. So.
Thank you. At Proclinical, a lot of the companies we work with are emerging biotechs where the need for a strong cultural fit is just as important as the need for somebody who is very strong technically. So when you're hiring for a cultural fit against a technical fit, have you ever compromised on one for the other? And if so, if there are any examples you can share?
Yeah, so I'll kick that one off. So Servier Pharmaceuticals, as I said, really started September 1st, and there were a number of people who were part of this divestment from Shire that came over, but the executive team was really only partially staffed coming in from Shire. So we had a big challenge to hire our executive team, as you might imagine. And so what was really, really key, I was at Shire, and I was tapped to come in to do this Servier Pharmaceuticals, which was awesome. It was like the best thing ever because you've got this amazing opportunity to build this company kind of from scratch. You've got an existing product, so we're commercialized, but it's still this startup. So one of the things we really had to look at was in building our leadership team, the cultural fit, we knew we wanted to be very transparent and have sort of a real empowering culture. I worked with the CEO, but we needed to have people who really could roll up their sleeves. So even if you have 35 years of HR experience, you're still like, how did we do that in payroll? And so we had to really look at individuals that were willing to roll up their sleeves, and from a cultural fit, that was a challenge. We wanted folks that could grow with us as well. So for an example, we had one of our executives that we knew he could fit with us, but we weren't sure that he had exactly what it was going to take to grow this particular area. And I don't want to say too much because you might go on LinkedIn and look him up or whatever, but this individual we ended up going with this individual because we kind of took a risk. And we said, we see, going back to some of what we heard earlier, right? You don't have to check every box. He had a lot of the boxes, and there was a stretch factor there. So we jumped on it, and he has been, I will say, since last September, probably one of our best leaders in the company. So we're really excited, and it's a decision we make every day, right? It's, what boxes do you check?
Yeah. I think of that as the bullseye, right?
Yeah.
So we went out for wine and oysters the other day, and I think we all leaned in on this question.
Yes, we sure did.
Because there's all kinds of stories to tell. So, we think of talent as a bullseye, really, when you're talking to your hiring managers and the team, and what does that ultimate person look like? And you can see them just thinking of that amazing person, and it's like, well, we don't create these people, we're not manufacturing them, right? So we have to find them, and so let's think about moving that bullseye out by the rings, and if you're willing to give with each one, what does that look like? Where are you willing to give? And most of the time, you're not willing to give on culture fit. It's really important. If anybody has made a bad hire, where the culture, and we think of it almost as the value, culture value. So what are you bringing to add to the culture? And we understand that by role, it may not all be the same, right? May not have everybody attending everything and being the mentor and the leader, but you do have to align on your values, and that's really what I think we look for. Are you aligning on your values? It may differentiate. If you've made, like I said, a hire where they can't integrate, they're just not going to have success. It doesn't really matter how great their skills are. And so we've also tried to think creatively about how can we help supplement. It's much easier to supplement on skills than it is to supplement on culture. So if you hire somebody for culture and they're short on skills, and you can understand what those skills are, how do we beef that up? Can you get a contractor? Can you get a consultant? And is there somebody that can give some of their time to help supplement that? And I think if you can think about it that way, then you might be able to get closer to that bullseye with actually waiting 12 months to find that person. Yeah. So I really think that the culture piece is really important. We were talking the other night about what's that percentage? Is it, what are you willing to give? And I think we all were aligned that just culture is really important.
Yeah. Small company.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah, I would agree. I mean, the cultural fit is a requirement for sure. Mm-hmm. I think also it depends a little bit on the level of the position. So as you were saying, right, at the executive level, you need architects, you need people who really can drive the culture. At a more junior level position, maybe that's where you're hiring much more for expertise, and so you have to kind of toggle between those two. Mm-hmm. But I think it's very much something that is individual to the company, to the position. We're at a stage where we need a lot of expertise, so it's really critical that people have the skill sets that we want, but they also have to have the culture. So we're not really compromising just yet.
Yeah.
Right. I think we have 3 or 4 minutes for our final one, which is around recruitment process. So a lot of thought goes into establishing a robust recruitment process. Do you think it's optimal to have one framework that you roll out globally, or does that need a bit of adaptation for your regional hiring?
You want to start that?
Sure. Go ahead. So I think a global framework is very important because, again, I think for issues of culture and really trying to have your company brand be meaningful at any location. However, that being said, I think the localization is also very critical, and I think the challenge for us as HR professionals is to really understand where can you compromise and where, what's most important for, all stakeholders. Mm-hmm. But I would say, have a global understanding and then make adjustments locally, because otherwise it's not going to be able to get the talent that you want.
Yeah, definitely the same thing. I think we have certain criteria and guidelines that we'd like to pull through that we feel like are relevant on a global scale, but then there are definitely cultural differences where we'll need to make adjustments. So like I said, we're on the front end of that, so stay tuned until next year.
Yeah, the only thing I would just reiterate, kind of our particular situation is that we really are dealing with the U.S. Hiring in the Boston, Cambridge competitive market. And for us, it's more about educating our parent company about the speed in which we need to proceed as well.
Great. I think we have a little bit of time if there's any questions from the floor that anyone would like to ask.
So I'm looking at all 3 of you and need some advice because I love hearing about this culture fit. And, at our company, I'm interviewing a senior executive and a recruiter says, John, you are in charge of measuring the cultural fit, especially on collaboration. And I'm going, well, how the hell do I do that? Do I ask him, are you collaborative? So when you say culture fit, give us one bit of advice. What does that really mean when a senior executive is trying to measure a cultural fit? What do they ask? How do you do that actually? Because I understand the concept, but we're all skilled at a different level. So how do we learn how to measure whether the candidate is a cultural fit for our company?
Go ahead.
I love this one. So, I mean, you all are familiar with behavioral-based interviewing, so there's so many different ways you can ask questions. And for me, it's less about asking a question, it's just getting people to talk and tell a story. If you can get them to talk and tell a story, then stuff comes out. And, oh, wow, that must have been so difficult. How did you respond to that? Oh, really? Okay, maybe not a great fit here, right? And so sometimes it's something as simple as that, because you can really condition yourself even as the interviewee. You can say, this is how, I'm looking at your website, I know what your values are, I'm prepared. But when you get into a conversation and you build that trust through the conversation, which is ultimately what you want, and I often say, like, the goal here is for both sides to have success, because if both sides don't have success, nobody has success, right? And so let's have a conversation around that. So for collaboration, I would start with just understanding how they work, right? How do they work, and what's the best environment that they've worked in? Where have they seen? Tell me a story where you've had this tremendous success. You've been put them in this frame of mind where, oh, I was just nailing it, and everything was working, and it felt great. What did that look like? Were the decisions part of a team? Were you alone making your decisions? I mean, I just had that conversation the other day, and we were looking for someone that could be really collaborative and work. He says, oh, I'm really great when I can just sit and do my work and make my decisions and just be over here all the time. And that just doesn't work, because we need you to be over here. So again, I think it's just through the storytelling, and then of course asking more questions to get clarification, and not just saying, not taking what they're saying as an absolute, but really just trying to understand it.
You mean something like, tell me a story when you completely undermined the team effort.
Yeah, or
And then there's that.
Or tell me more about how you influenced a particular decision, because that's collaboration as well, right? Tell me about a team that didn't report to you, but you needed to influence. So how did you get them to come to, a decision around that the company could embrace? So digging deeper and deeper on the behavioral interviewing, of course, yeah.
I was just going to add that, past behaviors, the best predictor of future behavior. So I think the same thing, right?
Yep.
How do you get examples that you can point to and say, okay, how would that play out in my organization?
Great. I think we're out of time. So Donna, Nicole, Carolyn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.